This is a presentation about Braintree Station, which was made by Steve Duhig and Nick Ellis, based on photographs taken in 1977 and pictures taken very recently by Nick Ellis. The presentation was made to the monthly Great Eastern Railway Society social forum. Further details are available for members, that is, online on the Great Eastern Railway Society website. In January 1975, I moved from Brentwood to northeast Essex, to Braintree. And it was quite a culture shock because I'd always lived in the town and never lived in the countryside before. In case you don't know where Braintree is, it's situated between Halstead and Chelmsford and Bishop Stortford, or what used to be the Roman capital of Britain, Colchester. Colchester, of course, is very close to the Suffolk border. When I arrived in Braintree in 1975, it wasn't long before I spotted an advertisement in Braintree and Witham Times, which had been put in there by Peter Jones, who set out to create Braintree Model Railway Club. The earliest reference I could find to the railway in Braintree for a poster or any publicity was 1860. The excursion poster is reproduced here, but Braintree Terminus actually was established in 1848. The terminus was where you can see the goods station here, it obviously did become a goods station quite soon afterwards. You can see here the line going west towards Bishop Stortford, there was of course the more modern station, 1865 brick architecture down here for the through station, and in the goods yard there was a temporary timber structure. This is a little later, 1890, but offers a bit more detail, and you can see the cattle pens here. This is the crane. You can see the actual station building and the goods shed, and a locomotive shed. This all became a goods area, and I lived in Braintree for some time before I discovered that this goods station area existed, and so I actually went over there to take some photographs, and that will be the subject of this presentation. Down towards the later station, which was a through station, and of course in time when the branch to Bishop Stortford was closed, it actually became a terminus again in its own right. But you can see lines crossing the road here. That's station approach, I believe, and crossing that area into the brickworks. There was also a brewery up here as well, coal yard. So quite a lot of industry in this area. A turntable down below, of course, as well. You can see quite a lot of detail. One of the reasons I left this picture in full size was because you can see a storage siding and perhaps a catch point on the other side of the station there. So in the 1919 map extract, there is a reproduction of the goods area of the station, and it shows the engine shed with the categories of locomotive it was suitable for. George Allen produced a book many years ago, I think in the early 60s. Sadly, I've not actually managed to get a copy of it, but I did have someone provide me with some very old-fashioned wet photocopies, which took a bit of work to get a bit clearer, and his diagrammatic representation of the Braintree, the old station, was included in the book, and here it is. Again, you can see the crane here. It doesn't talk about the cattle dock, it doesn't talk about coal, but it does show the categories for the engine shed. And most importantly, and in the bottom right hand corner, it shows a signal box, which would have been the junction signal box where the branch line here heading towards Stortford actually went away from the original terminus. It was controlled by the box there. So to 1976-77, this is what I found on my first visit. I was quite surprised to find so much infrastructure there in 1976. We had a bit of a discussion about where this actually is. You can kind of figure it out because the building behind, as Nick pointed out, is actually the only building that's still there in this area, and it's part of the old foundry there. So Blake and Elliott's foundry there. So it gives us some ability to see that this is probably the end of the line, and to the right is the station, the old station building. This is a picture taken by Ron Smith. Now, Ron Smith also attended the Model Railway Club, and I got to know him. He has quite a large collection of photographs of Braintree of this period. And better than that, even, he actually kept a diary of the goings-on for, I think it's about 18 months, from 1955 through 1956, the end of steam. He recorded the coming and goings of all the locomotives by type, by number, and he did the same for carriages as well. So there are even carriage numbers and types in his diary, and I actually I was able to get that into the Great Eastern Journal with his permission, with the photographs, and that is there, called Chronicle of a Branch Line. I'm afraid I don't have the issue to hand to say which issue it is, but I believe I called it Chronicle of a Branch Line. Interestingly, there's a superb book, of course, on Braintree by Peter Paye, P-A-Y-E. Peter Paye used Malcolm Root's painting of a almost identical scene on the front cover. It's so identical, I am very suspicious that Malcolm Root actually decided to paint Ron Smith here in the picture, talking to a driver. So I love my 2.5-inch ordnance survey maps. Unfortunately, they stopped not long after I was born, so I think this is the last 2.5-inch to the mile map of this area. But it's useful to give you both an indication of the individual railway lines, but also some more information about the structures surrounding the railway. So Ron Smith, as I said, had a few photographs, and this, I believe, is an F6 pulling 2 ex-Great Eastern Railway coaches. It's quite obvious in this picture that there are 2 platforms and 2 platform buildings linked by a steel footbridge. And here's the other angle, and you can see quite clearly there was a lot more to the station back in 1956 than there is today. A little later, presumably, maybe 57, 58, the footbridge has gone, but the station building is still there with the second platform. I have my doubts as to whether that second platform was actually in use at the time, except as a run round, but it's still there. The platform was still there in the early 1970s, but I think it had gone by the time I arrived in 75. The Great Eastern Railway shunting signal in the foreground is worthy of note. Once again, Malcolm Root, in case you didn't know, yes, I'm a fan. Malcolm Root produced a painting of this, of Braintree Station, showing that beautiful signal box, which was still there when I came to live in Braintree. And he also managed to include my favourite DMU, the early Derby unit. One small comment though, and that is that I don't believe that the station is quite right here. I think the grey rendering or grey painting and render, I think it's probably rendered here, was not done until later in the BR Blue period. And that at that time this scene is supposed to represent, it would have still had just the pointed brickwork there, brick colour. So the only picture I've ever found to date of the early Braintree station building is this one up on the left hand side, but it was already in 1925, long past being used as a passenger station, and it was being used as a goods office, coal office, possibly for some parcels, I don't know, but it was certainly used for as a freight office at that time. When I came in 1977, it was still there, and it was in quite a state, but it was still there, being used by Moy up until very recently as a coal office. This is the rail side, and you can see that it's actually quite high up above the track here, and it is. It seems that I have been told that there was some form of staircase down here. I'm thinking that the staircase and platforms may well have been wood. This was all supposed to be quite a temporary arrangement, and one hopes so, considering the comparison between Braintree's terminus and Malden East, of course, which is a far more flamboyant permanent structure. So it was always intended that this would be a temporary terminus, I'm sure. The goods yard, as I found it in '77, still had some interesting features, and you can see again Lake and Elliott's behind and on this side. The plate layers building or railway, I don't know, engine shed mess rooms or whatever it was, these here were very stoutly built and actually had quite some interesting architectural features, as it was mentioned on our discussion. Someone mentioned, you know, that the curved engineering bricks on the corners are quite interesting. I noticed that it's got a very thick concrete roof on the top, so I do wonder if this was actually created during the war to shelter the railway workers from strafing by enemy aircraft. The engine shed was somewhere in the middle here, I believe. At least the later iteration of the engine shed was. We suspect there was probably an earlier engine shed, perhaps only a timber one, which of course is long gone. This is the building I was talking about, and it was in quite a state by the time I saw it, but you can see actually it was done quite ornately actually, and the thick roof is fairly obvious. There was some evidence of a little bit of damage on the sides and ends, but I don't know whether that was anything to do with the wartime aspects. This is the site of the junction signal box, I believe, and it looks as though the foundation or some kind of foundation was still there. By the time I saw it, though, there was just this small shelter building together with a locked lever frame and a fairly newly installed phone to Whittam to talk to the signal box at Whittam, I presume. Don't know if that was part of the forthcoming electrification or not, or the new signalling. It may well have just been put in there for the drivers to speak directly to Whittam signal box. At the time of this visit, though, I wasn't aware that they were still getting trains in here. I went walking around and discovered some old bullhead track and looked around for the oldest chairs I could see, and I found a few 1897 chairs still on the wooden sleepers, and I did see quite a few turn of the century chairs, like 1901 or something like that, but these were the oldest ones I could find on that visit, that initial visit. Just to give you an idea of where we are, that's the map again. This building here is here, somewhere here. And you can see the end there of the platform. And the crane would have been midway down that platform there. So I then discovered from people at the club that there were still trains running in there, and I was quite astonished. So I made my way back over a few months later to see what I could see. And much to my surprise, my first view, I noticed that the goods shed was still there. I had not realised there was a goods shed there, and so that was interesting to see. I got down there, and you can see here the bogie pallet vans that were had their doors open, ready to receive pallets full of fertiliser. And that train ran once a week or so and took sacks of fertiliser strapped to pallets in these vans. What I discovered from Nick was he has some photographs which are not in this presentation, which show earlier trains, I think they're earlier trains, with hoppers, where the fertiliser was actually treated as a bulk load, and a conveyor belt would push the fertiliser up into the hoppers through a conveyor belt system. As I said, the goods shed was still there, and I wish I'd gone and had a better look at that. That looks very old to me, so I'm sad that that is well gone, of course, now. Of course, the state-of-the-art locomotive was there at the time, and that was the Class 37. I took quite a few pictures of the train and the locomotive. The locomotive I photographed from all sides, and a few years later Hornby actually produced this locomotive in this livery, so I like to think that my photographs might have been a good source of research for the Hornby to make the model. And the pallet vans on the train, by today's standards anyway, a simple model was made by Lima of these. They made them in the track colour bauxite, like this one. He also made one with the UKF colourful livery, which I believe I saw one there at some point. It certainly was a UKF fertiliser train. So you could, if you wanted to, make a train, a Braintree branch train of this era, quite easily. I did not do that. I did actually make a model of this Class 37, but I made it go back in time into the BR green livery. And as you can see now, the train is leaving, and it's going past Lake and Elliott's steel foundry here. The foundry there, by the way, I don't know if it ever actually used proper raw materials. It would tend to use mostly scrap metal that would come in to the foundry here. There's one, two, I think five similar bogie pallet vans here. When I looked at Nick's photograph of the bulk carriers, the hoppers, I think it was Ruth actually indicated that she could see, and we could all see 3 different types on the same train. So it was quite, even though it was a basic hopper train, it was actually quite interesting variety in it. So back to what was the through station, the later station, using what's termed 1865 station architecture. This picture is an interesting snapshot of its development, because you have some of the older features, such as the blue enamel British Railways Eastern Region signs on the box and on the side of the station. The new lighting has been installed, but the lampposts have not been painted, or I think they're probably either in their raw state or in primer. And the overheads, of course, are starting to come in, and you can see some of the uprights along here. The uprights were using, British Rail used a new system for Braintree. It had never been used before. They actually drilled into the ground a circular hole into the ground, and they had a tool to insert ready mix of some kind, concrete, to set the posts upright. I think the concrete comes to about something like a foot above the ground in a circular cylinder, and it supports the upright that way. It was a very, very fast way of installing overhead, and it had never been done before, but was very successful, and presumably a lot cheaper than the traditional way of doing the work. So the overheads have not been wired yet, just the uprights there. Probably not been done very long at all when this photograph was taken. Interesting to note that they had not worked on the platform yet here, even though they put the lighting in. I believe they did do some work to upgrade the platform and probably to lengthen the platform too. On this side here, on the right hand side, you can see the remains of the second station building, you know, that's still there at this time in 76. I wandered up the line, which I probably shouldn't have done, to take a picture of the distant, which I spotted, and was pleased to get a nice picture of that. Again, you can see the uprights behind it. It's quite an interesting juxtaposition. But for some strange reason, I did not take a picture of the home signal. The signal box was still there, as you can see, and I was so pleased to see it still there. It was actually really well looked after inside, but I did not gain access or manage to get a good angle to get a picture inside. This being in the days before digital cameras, of course. It really was a lovely box. I don't believe the box survived in any way, shape, or form, but the signage I think did survive. I don't know where they are though. I found an extra sign when I was going across the station at this time, where the line had petered out towards Bishop Stortford. Some of it had been made good with tarmac, and there was a path across to cross from one side to the other behind the branch line, so to speak, to the left of the branch line. And a gate was more or less permanently open, an iron gate, and on it had this 40 shillings penalty trespassing sign. I believe that is or was a Great Eastern sign. It was there for a year or two and then disappeared. Hopefully somebody looked after it. And this view you'll see again later on from Nick's photographs. A fairly well-known view of the what I call the gallows, with the lines not being laid yet. There's no insulators or overhead wire, catenary wire installed yet. So Braintree had gone through quite a change from a branch line with a couple of carriages through a period probably just about when I arrived in 75, where it looked as though it really was going to close. The rail car was not there when I had arrived, so they were looking at things more seriously for the line. The two car Cravens at the bottom, that view from Allenthwaite's is very much how I saw the station in 1975. 4 years later, it really hadn't changed very much. And I came to the town. But even in 75, I think they were really not doing much to save the line, because I know I missed a train there and I had to wait 3.5 hours for a next train, which didn't, wasn't very encouraging for the future of the line. Of course, then we had the electrification came in, so we went from one extreme to the other, because right from the beginning they were running 12 coach trains into Braintree, even though the platforms along the branch could only take 8 coaches. And I, for one, descended directly onto the permanent way from the EMUs several times, coming in from London and even just from Cressing. I don't know how I got on the train at Cressing. I don't remember, but basically I didn't think twice about jumping down onto the track from the trains in those days. And they were slam door trains, of course, so there was nothing to stop you getting on the wrong carriages and having to get down onto the track to walk up the ramp onto the platform. Never got told off for it. 1st of October 77 was the official opening of the electric train, as they call it, electric train to London. The excursion there, £1.50, and I duly paid my excursion amount and got my souvenir, and then I also got my ticket. The only trouble was that train never ran. It was cancelled, and we were told to go back and get our money back, and I decided not to do that. Decided to keep my ticket and souvenir and the little advertising slip that was handed to me in the station. And to my knowledge, they're the only ones that survived. But that train never actually ran. There was no replacement train as a celebration, and no opening ceremony to my knowledge at all involving the mayor or anything like that. It just suddenly started the next week to run, and that was it. So Nick very kindly went over to these sites to see what it was like today, and thank you, Nick, for doing that. And he also then provided some photographs, and he also provided this map, which is the map of how Braintree is today. Now you can see the branch line going up through here into the goods yard, which was situated in this area here. And of course you can also see the line going that used to go all the way to Bishop Stortford. So once again, coming up here, that's where the railway line used to be. This is the area where the tracks were for the goods yard. You can see the evidence of the changes that have happened for the industry up here. So again, there we can show it a little bit better. This is all the Lake and Elliot's area here, and these are the buildings that survived. It's really hard to get these two maps to match up. So in fact, the animation earlier on was a little bit closer than this final result. And you can see that Nick took a photograph from this angle here, if you watch for the camera icons, and that's what he was seeing. So very much the same as the picture I took in '77, although he was trying to match it exactly, I think, Nick was, and couldn't get through the gate because you weren't allowed through the gate. But he did manage to get a photograph over the gate, over the fence. And once again, you can see a shopping trolley in the foreground there, which I do so hope isn't the same one that I found nearly 50 years prior. Some things never change. So Nick also said that every time he went to take pictures, a train arrived. A slight difference from waiting for 3.5 hours to get your next DMU. My understanding is that before COVID, the line was hitting 750,000 passengers a year. Again, a huge contrast from having the Wagener Maschinenbau rail bus with a handful of passengers on it. So it's still developing. And here you can see Nick has gone a little bit further south and taken a picture, trying to look through to see the area south of the station where the turntable was, and it's all allotments there now. When I lived there, I was told that the well for the turntable had been filled in with ballast and dirt. I don't know if the well plates are still there or not. There was another turntable down towards Whittam, just as the branch joined the main line. I believe they did remove the well for that. That was there for many years without being filled in. You could see it from the train, just as the wheels squealed round a very tight curve onto the main line into Whittam Station. View the other way. John Ray's fitness trail is there now, and John Ray was a famous horticulturalist that the folks in Braintree celebrate here and there, naming different things after John Ray. And then up towards the old goods station. Wow, what a change. Completely new. Everything's completely new. No evidence to be spotted there of the railway site now. with one or two exceptions, because they have actually used some railway names there. But I asked Nick if this had any bearing to the track, this particular area where it's going underneath the building, but the answer is no, it does not. It's just completely redesigned the whole area. They have tended to use some architecture that reflects Victorian sash windows and mid-Victorian portals over the doors, like this one here. But clearly modern materials are being used. And another picture across to show the remains of Lake and Elliott's. The top of the chimney was clearly demolished some time back, and they left the bottom part there. I'm not sure quite why that would be, but that's what they did. And this is a building which Nick was able to take reference. So the names do appear here. They have named a couple of places after railway interest. And you can see the bollards with the mock cannon bollards here, a bit like you see in the City of London and the Tower of London. But they are mock ones, of course. I remember my dad showing me some real ones when I was a child, but I bet they're not there anymore now, in London that is. So it gives a bit of atmosphere there, kind of a bit of an industrial, Victorian industrial atmosphere there. And they used Holden close, they used a couple of other names like Gresley. They used the name for Gresley for one road there. And for some reason they chose to use the one for Wickham, and we were chuckling about that because we don't believe there was much of Wickham's running in this area. An occasional visit from a Wickham DMU, and the Wickham trolley for the plate layers is probably about as far as it goes. So then Nick took a picture of a puddle, and he saw something down under the puddle, so he went round the other way because of the light was reflecting off the surface, and he took this to show that there is still some rails here. Now these rails are actually near the news station and reflect the industrial activity across the other side of railway approach. I'd lived there for several years and never come across these, so I was really surprised. I think Nick was very surprised to find them there too. Not least because they probably would have fallen out of use a lot earlier than the goods yard. They actually fell out of use in the 1950s, probably mid 1950s. And here you can see there's two lines. This is the end of the two lines. The station is across railway approach to the left here, and we have our back here to Whittam, basically. Looking forward to where the railway would have gone round to the left out to Dunmow and Bishop Stortford. But these lines are still there at the moment. So what we didn't cover, I mentioned that Braintree is constantly changing, and it is no longer the quiet little market town, Essex market town, that I found when I came to Braintree in January '75. Nearly 50 years later, it is a bustling suburban town with lots of commuters using the railway. And they wanted to attract more people still to the area, so they built a whole group of outlets, shopping outlets, and decided that would require a new station. So Braintree Freeport was constructed. Not really covering it here, but that is part of the current history. Finally, we had a really interesting discussion about four-wheel petrol Fordson tractors that were converted to shunting engines at Lake and Elliott's, and were used. And Nick, being associated with the Colne Valley Railway, will not mind me trying to encourage anybody watching this or listening to this to go to the Colne Valley Railway and pay a visit. And Henry lives there. Henry is in need of tender love and care, apparently, but he is still living in the Colne Valley Railway. He is the survivor of two of these vehicles. Gordon Egger has a picture on his Flickr site, flickr.com, FLICKR.com. He has a picture there of the other surviving engine at Lake and Elliott's, but I say surviving because it only stayed there until after the Lake and Elliott's closed, and that one has not been preserved and has been lost. It's slightly different in design to this one, but it's the same idea, but slightly different. Apparently, Gordon says that Lake and Elliott's made quite a few of these things and sold them as well. So, well worth a visit to Gordon Edgar's page on flickr.com. I've put the link there. The description he has of these and the history of these vehicles is really quite fascinating, quite detailed. I haven't reproduced it here because Gordon Edgar has got copyright on this material. So if you want to see it, trip over to flickr.com, find Gordon Edgar's site, and you should be able to find the other locomotive. And that is the end of the presentation. A little bit more information here than we gave at the time. Still interested in Braintree, and I hope you've enjoyed it even a tenth as much as I have, because although it's nearly 50 years ago now since I moved there, I really still have a very big interest in the Braintree, Malden and Witham railways. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.